Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with W.B.J. Williams or Walt Williams. And Walt is a fantasy author, but he's also a nonfiction author. And Walt, I'm going to ask you to tell people what it is that you actually write.
Well, that's an interesting question. Um, for my day job, I'm an information security executive, and so I write things such as creating an information security program from scratch, which I severely doubt that anybody who's watching this will be interested in. But I have a fascination with mythology. And all of my fiction and one particular bit of nonfiction is based on mythology. So let's start with the nonfiction. Um, I have this lovely little title here, The Reality, Mythology, and Fantasy of Unicorns, that was inspired somewhat by research I did into my first novel. I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. Um, the novel is heavily based on the mythology of unicorns, but it turns out that unicorns were real once upon a time, if you were. They lived until about, from what we can tell, the 1300, no, sorry, 13,000 years ago in Europe. They were huge, huge beasties. Their scientific name was Elasmotherium, a distant relative of the rhinoceros, with the horns squarely on the forehead. The fun part is that if you read the Persian or the Greek or the Indian accounts of unicorns from back centuries ago, you discover that they're very accurately portraying Elasmotherium. And we even have a cave painting from France about 13,000 years ago that depicts what appears to be Elasmotherium from the perspective of somebody who saw one. And again, Greek and Persian accounts of Thesmotherium describe a unicorn that was ferocious and frightening. And if they charged at you, you better get the heck out of there fast. And and so our early ancestors were terrified of these things and created stories around them. And over time, those stories changed tremendously. But even through the medieval ages, if you take a look at Durer's drawings of unicorns, you can see pictures of unicorns impaling kings and knights as they charge through the retinue. And so, even up until the Middle Ages, the idea that unicorns were these huge, scary beasties um, was quite common to our folklore and our mythology. And it's only really been in the last 800 years or so that unicorns have become these cute, cuddly things with rainbow tails and sparkles that we tend to find at our local stores and give to our children. And that kind of all started with Hildegard of Bingen, who uh, created some interesting ideas about the unicorns responding to human purity. And it went off the rails from there. The novel that I mentioned that inspired all of that is this, The Garden at the Roof of the World. It's a story about five women in the middle of the 13th century who attempt to return to Eden to save the life of the unicorn that walked with Adam and Eve before the fall. And so very, very heavily inspired by mythology. Um, After all, referring to the fall. I'm talking about the fall of Adam and Eve. So we're looking at Christian mythology a little bit there, but also Jewish mythology, Hindu mythology, Islamic mythology, Buddhist mythology, as all of these different cultures have stories to tell about unicorn. And so I wove so many of those stories into my novel. For instance, did you know that a unicorn stopped Genghis Khan from invading India? Well, if you read the autobiography of Genghis Khan, you discover that, yes, indeed, he and his armies were marching across the Himalayas to invade India, just like he invaded so many other places, but encountered a unicorn. And the unicorn did homage to him, but gave him the impression that no, this was not the right thing for him to do. And so he stopped and turned around and went back and invaded someplace else. Unfortunately, there were no unicorns there to stop him. Uh, and But that story, amongst so many others, got woven into The Garden at the Roof of the World, where these women are attempting to find Eden, or perhaps Shangri-La, where it's hidden at the roof of the world. And it's a delightful yarn. A lot of fun, action, adventure, fantasy, bit of sword play, um, encountering demons in the dark, encountering demons in the depths of the oceans as they try to do something um, to restore a creature that knew us back when we were innocent and new.
Wow.
The yeah, the other novel is also based on mythology, but a very different kind of myth. Yeah, let me bring it up here. Johnny Talon and the Goddess of Love and War is my latest novel, and unlike the Garden Under the Roof of the World, it's a bit noir inspired. So it's a detective story uh, that explores a bit of human darkness. We're taking a look at addiction here. The Goddess of Love and War is a fascinating character in Sumerian mythology. She's the reason that Gilgamesh loses his beloved Enkidu. She's the reason why Gilgamesh goes on his epic quest to try to overcome death and achieve immortality, and he fails at this. Um, she's, you see, she called down the Bull of Heaven, and the Bull of Heaven was killed by Enkidu and Gilgamesh. And then she had a temper tantrum about this and went to the chief of the gods, who proclaimed that Enkidu must die for this. And the Bull of Heaven's husband, sorry, the Bull of Heaven was the husband of her sister, Ereshkigal, the goddess of the underworld. And so she journeyed into the underworld to offer her apologies. Now, being the goddess of love and war, she went in complete war paint to seduce anything that would come in her way. So she's decked out in her sexiest dress. She's got her makeup on. She's got her jewels on to go to this funeral. And of course, when she gets there, she's not well received, and she's stripped bare, she's killed, hung up on a hook to be eventually rescued. But the story of going into hell and experiencing the ravages of hell is very much the story that everybody who goes through addiction must face. Whether or not we're addicted to opium, or we're addicted to um, alcohol, or addicted to gambling, or whatever, the journey through addiction is a journey through hell. And you are going to experience internal torture and the ravages of your actions. And so the story is a great way to take a look at addiction, especially since one of the things associated with the cult of Inanna, the goddess of love and war, is opium. She introduced opium into human society as this wonderful cure for pain in the form of poppy tea. And so I'm not drinking poppy tea right now.
I
I'm
would
just
hope not.
drinking uh, regular, normal tea. But poppy tea was bitter, horribly tasting, but it was at the time the best cure they had for crippling pain, and much harder to get addicted to. And so um, people used it fairly readily if they needed surgery, if they needed recovery from an injury, recovery from childbirth, etc. And um, so the consequences of that, obviously, addiction to opium is something we still struggle with all these many centuries later. And so, what if the goddess of love and war became human and became addicted to this thing that she introduced into the world? What would that be? And how would she get through all of that? And of course, any good journey through hell requires a guide. Just look at Dante's Inferno. He had Virgil for a guide. And of course, Virgil went through hell and he had somebody else for a guide. I'm forgetting who guided him through his journey through hell. So I give her a guide. It's surreal detective Johnny Talon. Um, Johnny is your typical gumshoe. He's going to push through whatever obstacle he can face at whatever cost to himself to meet the needs of his client. In this particular case, that means he's going through hell with her because every journey through addiction should be accompanied by somebody who's helping you through. You don't go through it alone. And so it's a somewhat wild, rompous ride through hell and back again. But it's also a look at the mythology underneath all of that. And I'm very serious about this being a wild, rompous ride. This diction is hell, but that doesn't mean we can't have fun reading about a goddess going through hell to try to get past the addictions that she's suffering from herself.
Okay. Um, so I would assume the inspiration for these books was mythology
Mhm.
and it sounds as though addiction played a big part in to Johnny Talon.
It does.
Um, so what was the actual inspiration for Johnny Talon?
Oh, this is kind of fun. My wife and I love to go to the Museum of Fine Arts, and we're members, and we go all the time. Um, they had up for about a decade on one of the exhibit halls a painting by the Belgian surrealist Deval. And this painting shows two naked people in a surreal landscape. She is holding up a mirror, but it doesn't reflect her. He is holding out his hand, as offering a solution to her. And floating in this landscape, you find a jeweled necklace and a jeweled bracelet. And so each time I'd encounter this painting, it's like, there's a story here, but what is it? It's like, I finally found the story.
Hmm.
And I started to write it down. She is the goddess of love and war, who, in looking in the mirror, is not seeing the truth, and she needs help in finding it. He is Johnny Talon, offering her this truth, and they are meeting in this ravaged landscape. Everything around them is ruins as they go through one of these journeys through hell. And the things that they are finding along the way, the necklace, the bracelet, help them get through this. And so that was the inspiration behind all of it. And since I encountered it in a surreal painting, I decided that I was going to write the story surreally. And so each scene in a way is inspired by a different surrealist painting. And if I ever got stuck while writing it, I'd flip through my wife's art books and find another painting. It's like, yes, this is it. This is what I'm writing next. And so I had a blast in writing it and reading through it. What the beautiful thing about surrealism is it's a deep exploration of dreams in our subconscious. And that is very much what Johnny's doing as he's helping her through these things, is he's helping her explore her own subconscious, but not in a we're going to sit down and do therapy thing, as in we're going to go gangbusters and start shooting down some demons kind of thing, or we're going to enter hell and break it down and break through kind of thing.
Wow. So how how come addiction played such a part in it?
Oh, I've lost relatives to addiction. I've lost people I love and care for. And growing up, my father was the child of an alcoholic. At one point, he was thrown out of the house. He was 10 when this happened because she was in a drunken rampage. And so I watched how addiction destroys people. And as I got old, as I learned who my grandmother was as I grew up, I got to see that people who do terrible things in the throes of addiction are not terrible people. And so I wanted to explore the struggles to get past addiction. And it really is a journey through hell. And my dad and I, when he was alive, we used to have lengthy talks about different myths, whether or not they're Christian myths or myths of other cultures. It's something we shared together. And at one point, we were discussing, is there any path to salvation for the demons of hell? And he couldn't think of one. And I thought, well, actually, maybe there is. And so that question in the back of my mind, the fact that we were never able to come up with something together while he was alive, always plagued me. And so looking at the goddess of love and war, um, well, maybe just maybe all the creatures we label demons are not necessarily demons like us. Perhaps they too are complex people where they've been caught and trapped by their own mistakes and their own, um, well, in some ways, addiction is being plagued by your own demons, yes? But
Yes.
they come from you. And as they come from you, they are a part of you and they're not necessarily evil, but they're things holding you back. And so how do you transform yourself through that so that these part of you, they'll still always be part of you? And so I looked at bringing a character through that, but by making her someone who is a demon. I'm trying to show people how these broken parts of themselves are beautiful and can help them get through it if they change how they approach that part of themselves. Because that's how you get through addiction, is by learning to love yourself deeply without reservation, all of yourself, including the broken parts, and then working on transforming the broken parts so that those weaknesses that brought you into addiction can become your strengths in other contexts.
Hmm.
And that sounds really deep and heady, but that's, you know, that's where noir fiction really shines, because noir fiction is a fun adventure story as we explore the deep and heady aspects of our lives. So if you take a look at the Maltese Falcon, it's another story about addiction. In this case, it's addiction to wealth and prosperity and the easy fix, the falcon. They are addicted to the idea of the falcon, and how all the people in the story are acting shows their addiction and their willingness to throw away their lives in this single-minded pursuit of the falcon. And then there's Sam trying to get through all of this and maybe, just maybe, pull the woman he loves out of it if he can. And
Okay.
so it's a remarkable story, and noir gives you the roots that you could explore these things tremendously in depth. And if you put that into fantasy, where you get the bones of mythology, and you combine them together, you can get a really rich, deep story. That's a lot of fun to read. And the Maltese Falcon is, for those who have seen the movie, the book is even better.
Okay.
And Johnny Talon and the Goddess of Love and War pulls in from that as much as it's pulling in from Gilgamesh.
Okay. Great. So what kind of research did you have to do in order to write Johnny Talon?
Oh, I read about four different translations of Gilgamesh. It turns out that We have a two different main versions, an Assyrian version and a Sumerian version, and they differ from each other. I read Inanna's Descent into the Underworld, which is an amazingly powerful myth of uh, confronting your mistakes and dealing with the consequences of them, and then emerging from that as a more complete person. I read through tons of noir fiction. So I read Chambers, I read Hammett, I read if you've never read John Ford's The Last Hot Time, it's a brilliant fantasy noir story that deals with uh, gun runners and elves and set in a 1930s Chicago setting. Um, and I also toured a lot of art museums and a lot of art books, looking for um, all sorts of paintings that would help me encounter uh, um, the right way to help me tell this story. And it was a fun ride because I never quite knew what was going to happen next. I had a sense of where I was going and why, but I wanted to explore it in a way that it would be unexpected. So instead of outlining it, I let myself encounter what the characters would do next
Hmm.
through my exploration of all of these other things. And I had a blast because I'm a weird, complicated person. And um, if you sit down to read it, you'll see that it's filled with humor, it's filled with action and adventure, because I take the fun that I had and I put that onto the page.
So it sounds like you're a pantser rather than an outliner.
Yes. I was for that story, yes. The Garden to the Roof of the World was actually very carefully planned out. I was writing in many ways, a medieval romance. And I'm not talking the man meets woman, falls in love, and gets married kind of romance. I'm talking the chivalrous knight on an epic quest kind of romance, though both kind of romances are in the story. And so it was written to the structure of the seven deadly sins and the seven cardinal virtues, where for each of the main characters, I'm exploring those sins and those virtues and the struggles of the individuals as they're going on their epic quest to try to get to heaven, which you can only do if you're seeking purity of soul. And the
Hmm.
only way, the only cure for the eldest unicorn is the fruit from the tree of life that would grant immortality, the fruit that Adam and Eve did not eat. And she has to be able to re enter Eden and pick that fruit and somehow not take it for herself, but as a gift to somebody else. And that's a wonderful, wonderful spiritual journey that, again, is filled with action and adventure and nights and encountering monsters and needing to overcome the monsters within as well.
Hmm. So you're getting back to into Johnny Talon.
Yes.
What was the biggest challenge that you had in writing and putting it out?
Oh, probably the biggest challenge is to take something that's written so chaotically and bring it together as a unified story with a narrative that moves forward. So the initial draft was a bit all over the place, and I had to get very ruthless in my editing and pulling things out. And some of the things I lost were absolutely uh, bonkers fun, but they just didn't fit. And some of the things I deeply regret that I had to cut. But and this had to be a story for people who are not me. And so I had to bring it together into a coherent narrative, even though as I was writing it, I'm exploring my own subconscious and following every single loose thread as I'm trying to get at well, what does a journey through hell look like? And uh, how do you explore that without um, being literal?
Mhm. And when you're cutting, um, how did it feel to get rid of a huge piece, huge pieces of your book?
Oh, it depended upon the piece. With some of the pieces, it's like, oh yeah, that was just bad. Good riddance to that.
Hmm.
I'm glad I'm rethinking this because that just wasn't working. For others, it was like, oh darn, I really liked that. I don't want to get rid of it, but it's the right thing to do. And there's an expression that writers use, kill your darlings. Um, that's kind of what we're talking about. When we're writing a story, this is a labor of love. Um, and all the things, so many of the things that we write are things that we put our heart and souls into. And when you realize that that wonderful, wonderful thing is just not right for this story, it can be heartbreaking. But I wanted this to be a book that people would sit down and read and find fun and engaging and breathtaking and mind-blowing in a way, in a good way. And that's only going to happen if I make it so that it's approachable.
Hmm.
And so some of the wild rides had to, well, maybe they'll be part of a different story. The beautiful
Okay,
thing about writing in the modern era is you can always save it in a different file.
right. And so now, what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Oh, I'm actually writing two more bits of nonfiction for the Around the Garden at the Roof of the World. Um, People think history is a boring thing. It isn't. It's fun. Imagine if you could go back in time to the 1300s and walk through Constantinople. What would you see? What would it smell like? What would it look like? Um, So instead of writing a history about these people who lived a long time ago and in a world that seems so far, far away from us, I'm writing about, well, what if you could step back in time and walk through these cities? What would you encounter there? It's kind of a time traveler's guide to the 13th century. And so there are going to be two books coming out along those veins. They're going to be a lot of fun as I'm trying to make or show a different side to history and get at how people lived and how people loved and how people dealt with these cataclysmic events that sometimes happened in lives. For instance, the fire that destroyed so much of Constantinople in 1203. And and just help people walk in somebody else's shoes, somebody who lived 800 years ago. So those are the things I should have out later this year. But the story that I'm working on right now is somewhat one that's near and dear to my heart. Um, it's a story of a man in early 20th century who, on his way to meet with some friends, gets horribly injured in an accident. He I don't know how many of your readers know too much about the early 20th century, but the anarchist movement was quite active in the early 20th century, where anarchists were throwing bombs at people trying to assassinate different world leaders and get rid of states and bring the world into a state of anarchy, anarchists. He sees one of these bombs thrown at a world leader and rushes to try to save um, her and her or her how shall I say um, let me give you a tiny bit of background. This world leader just happens to be the queen of the fawns, and her carriage is being pulled by deer. And he doesn't care much about her, but he doesn't want to see the deer get hurt. He's an animal lover. So he tries to save the life of the lead stag, keep it from falling into the hole that's been opened up by this bomb. And he and the stag tumble down into the hole together. It crushes him. And so he's horribly hurt. The stag is horribly hurt. They're both pulled out. He's taken to a hospital, but he's now got to get through life very altered from who he was, because he's not only hurt physically, his head got hurt. And we all know from concussions what the damage that can be done to a brain that's just slammed into something. And um, and so it's him trying to put his life back together again so that he can be the person he was before he got so badly hurt. And so many of us face a situation like that, where we have a life-altering event that makes it really hard to be the person we want to be within the world. And so I'm telling his story, and it's about 60% done. And I'm just how it's some of the richest writing I've ever done. Um, and again, I'm having a blast in writing it. So when he gets out of the hospital, the Queen of the Satyrs, who he saved the life of, brings him to her kingdom so that he can recover there in safety, because now the anarchists want him dead too. And when he gets back to Paris, where he's studying to become a magician, um, he um, he has to avoid getting killed by the anarchists while trying to learn the complexities of the magic he's trying to learn, while recovering his ability to think the way he used to think, um, because his brain has been damaged and it's not working the way it used to, and it's getting in his way. And how he turns to alcohol to try to get through that, as so many people turn to substances to try to get through things, and what that does to him, etc. So it's it's a wonderful exploration of somebody trying to put their life back together again, and the mistakes they make along the way. Um, but I wanted to make this a story with a little bit of magic to it for a couple of reasons. One is it gives us some distance from the real world so that we can think deeper on what's going on here, and we don't feel that I'm being so confrontational. The other is that there's this illusion that if we could do magic, we could solve all of our problems. And I wanted to explore that illusion that no, there is no magical cure for all of our problems, even if we could do magic.
Mhm.
Um, that exploring our problems takes work. And so, like with the other two books, I'm writing more than just action and adventure. I'm writing something that's trying to think deeply on the human condition while making it fun. And that's, for me, the best part about writing fantasy, is that you can write something that thinks deeply on the human condition, but weaves that into a fun action adventure story that you can get lost into and escape the world a little bit. But when you come back, you're now a different person from having read it. And you don't necessarily realize how you've gone through that journey. But that's what mythology is best at. And fantasy is, after all, a modern way of expressing a mythological story.
Okay, great. Now, we need to pick up the pace a little bit because
Sorry.
we only have an hour. So, I have questions now about you being a writer.
Yes.
Um, what is your favorite part about being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Oh, um, when I encounter people who have read my work and they tell me what they found there, how much they enjoyed it, hopefully, that's my favorite part. The very first time that happened to me, I had such joy that they found such joy in reading The Garden at the Roof of the World. It's an amazing feeling. It's um, almost like somebody telling you that that piece of your soul that you've shared within the world um, was wonderful for them.
Great.
It's a wonderful, wonderful feeling.
Okay. What do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
Mm, it's so lonely. I'm when I'm sitting down to write, I'm not spending time with my wife, who I love. I'm not spending time with my kids. I'm not spending time with my friends. These I have to write. These stories have to come out. I'm the only person alive who can tell them. I'm driven to write, but it is a lonely thing, and I have to make sacrifices and choices about how much time I spend away from my family to do this. Just like I have to make choices and sacrifices in how much time I spend away from my story to spend time with them. It's a part of me. It's who I am within the world. But it is very, very lonely at points.
Yeah, I most of the authors that I've spoken with say that they're introverts.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that we don't enjoy interacting with others. It we just expend energy in doing so instead of getting energy from the encounters. Um, However, with my wife, she opens me up. I don't feel exhausted by spending time with her. I feel enlivened from doing so. She's helped me in so many different ways, and my time spent with her is so much joy, whether or not it's just doing the laundry together or going to be doing what we're going to be doing this week and transitioning our closets from winter to summer because winter was spring, because apparently winter here in New England is ending a month early, and yay for that. Um, and I'll get rid of a little bit more of the beard and trim that down as well. So it doesn't matter if we're doing these mundane tasks, just spending time, whatever we're doing together, is so much fun because I'm doing it with her. So yes, I'm an introvert, and yes, when I'm done talking to you, I'm going to be exhausted. When I go to do a reading at BossCon or Resia or ReaderCon, which I'll be doing this summer, or sit on a panel, by the end of that, I'm tired. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have fun doing it. It just
Mhm.
means that encountering others wears me out faster. Where extroverts, they get energy from these interactions with others
True.
and it charges them up. Yeah, I'm an introvert, and nice thing about having the day job that I have is I've developed a huge tool set to get myself past that so that I can have these conversations
Mhm.
about my work and seem lively and energetic while doing so instead of um, I don't know, hiding behind a corner.
Okay. So, what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Oh, Um, I love encountering other authors and hearing their
Mm.
stories and being captivated by the stories that they've created within the world. Um, and so I go to BossCon, I go to ReaderCon each year for quite so many years now, and learning from them and their challenges and their approaches and that's such fun. I'm with my peers and with people to whom story means the same kind of things differently within themselves, because we're all different people. Um, that's a blast.
Mhm. And are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that you'd recommend to others that have helped you in the past and that you'd recommend?
Well, if you're going to be a writer, I highly and you want to write fantasy, I highly recommend getting involved in the online writing workshop. Uh, it's sff.onlinewritingworkshop.com. It's this huge URL, but it's a vibrant community of other authors who share your work online with each other so that they'll review your work, you can review their work, and you can all get better at what you're doing. And it's a great way to get started in a career and develop relationships so that as you get more mature in your career, one of the things you're going to want to have are people you can turn to with, hey, Leo, I've got another completed manuscript. Would you mind taking a look at it? And Leo, who I met through the online writing workshop, would hopefully say, yes, absolutely. And I've read a number of his works, and he's a brilliant author. And so we help each other refine our existing stories through this online club that we've joined. And I've mentioned ReaderCon. ReaderCon is kind of a club that meets annually of people who love to read, people who love to write, people who are just enthralled by story and love to sit and talk about story at length. BossCon's another such place. It's for people who love science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And Aresia is another one. So yes, we those are clubs in a way. We only come together annually, but people from all over the world will come at ReaderCon this coming July. We're going to have Jasper Ford as one of the authors coming over from Britain, and we'll get a chance to sit with Mr. Ford and discuss his stories and how he's written them. And so they're wonderful clubs to be part of.
Okay, great. So, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
Mm. Be open to critique. Um,
Mm,
that when somebody is pointing out something that they've seen in the story that it's worth listening to, they may not give you something that helps you make it better, but listen to what they have to say because it's their encounter with your words. So it's worth hearing. Now, so sometimes being the critiques that you get will hurt to read them. But you have to get past that because it's not about you, it's about the story. And if they're seeing a flaw in the story that you didn't see, as much as that hurts to learn, you want to get past that hurt and start thinking about the story from their eyes. Because stories are dialogues with readers. And you want to be able to ensure that um, if people are seeing flaws in what you've attempted, from their perspective, that you can understand their perspective and get past it. And sometimes what they're seeing as, is exactly the things you need to fix. And so it's well worth listening.
okay. And do you have any other pieces of advice that you'd like to share with our audience?
Sure. If you're going to write, write. Don't worry if it's any good. Just sit down and write. Get it on page. You can make the editing process is where you make it good. And each new story that you write will be better than the last one because of the work involved in writing the prior stories. Johnny Talon is better written than the Goddess of Love, sorry, than the Garden Under the Roof of the World. The story I'm writing now is better written than Johnny Talon because of the things I learned while writing those other two stories. And of course, both of those are better than the things that never got published and never should. Uh, uh, well, there's a wonderful thing, NaNoWriMo, where people tried to, this crazy thing of trying to write 50,000 words of a novel in 1 month. But the goal behind it is to just turn off your critique and sit down and put words on the page and forget about if they're any good or they're coherent or if anyone would want to read it, but to build up this habit of everyday writing. And so if you don't have the kind of time to do that in the month of November, but if you could write a single page every single day, before the end of the year, you'll have produced a novel. all you got to do is a single page a day, and you'll get a novel by the end of it. So just write.
Can you explain a little bit about NaNoWriMo?
Yeah, I did it once. It was a lot of fun. You basically make a commitment to try to produce 50,000 words in the month of November. And you sign up with a bunch of others who are going to do the same. And each day you sit down and you write as much as humanly possible. And then at the end of that day, you upload your word count into the site that it's just helping you keep track. But on the site are all these other people who are doing it and rooting for you, and you are rooting for them and encouraging each other. Keep going, you can do it. So it's kind of like a writing marathon. And at the end of it, well, 50,000 words is a good bit of a novel.
Hmm. So,
It's a fairly
how do you
short one, but still,
how,
you've
how
got a
do you
story.
how do you do that? How do you get started? You Is it nanowrimo.com?
I don't remember. It's been a few years since I've done it.
Yeah, I think it is.
It's either .com or .org or .net. I'm going to do the illegal thing here of Googling. It's nanorimo.org. NANORIMO.org.
Thank you.
And it's a fun organization. Many libraries will have events throughout the nation to support authors where they'll open themselves up, come here and write together throughout it. You'll have other organizations um, besides libraries supporting the authors in terms of different support groups. There'll be different meetups and places where you can either sit down and write together online or get together in person and write together. And so you have all of these people being intensely quiet as they're getting words on page together, but they're together. And
Hmm.
so it gets past that writing is a lonely thing. And for this beautiful month, you are a member of a community of people who are trying to do the same thing you are doing.
Okay.
And that's part of what makes it worthwhile trying. And some people get through it and do all the 50,000 words, but even if you don't, you've won because you've written every single day and you've made connections with others. And those are the beautiful things about it.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, so now I have questions about you as a person.
Oh,
What is or are your passions when you're not writing? And how do you make time to do the for to the things that you love?
oh, um, I love art. And so on a periodic and regular basis, we take a day, my wife and I, and we go to an art exhibit and we explore the museum. And um, that's just a matter of art, making the time for it. I love dance. Because of COVID, we haven't seen as many ballets as we'd like. Um, we're on the older side. This gray is real, and so we need to be more careful. But we love to go and watch the Boston Ballet together and see that. Um, love to sit and read, and so I'll spend the last half hour of each day reading somebody else's fiction. Um, I love to go for long walks in the woods, and so when the weather is not so cold and bitter, um, Sharon, Massachusetts, which is where I live, is blessed with both the Moose Hill Nature Preserve and Borderland State Park and Rattlesnake Hill. So we go on long walks in the woods together. And we'll go out and explore other reservations through the trustees of reservations or other Audubon preserves throughout the state. Massachusetts is wonderful in terms of how much open and natural space um, we have to explore. And obviously, I love information security. It's a weird kind of fun job, but I'm making certain that my company can thrive in a world that's risky and dangerous. And I'm somewhat accidentally good at my job. And so that is a passion. And so I go and attend conferences, learn from my peers. I'm having dinner tonight with a bunch of, sorry, tomorrow night with a bunch of my peers. We're going to sit down around the table and just discuss what works, what doesn't, and how we're getting through it all. Um, I love philosophy and theology. I'll sit down and I'll read. Um, I love mythology, and so
Mhm.
I'll gladly sit down and oh, there's a new translation of Beowulf. Oh, cool! And and by the way, the new translation of Beowulf I'm thinking of, and of course I'm an empty-headed. I can't remember the name of the translator. It's wonderful. It's vibrant. It brings the story to life. It starts out with bro, as it tries to use contemporary languages to tell this ancient story and make it relevant for modern readers. It's delightful. Uh, I'm filled with all sorts of different passions, and thankfully my wife is very, very understanding, and she shares many of these interests, and so we go and explore them together. And I'm certain there are things I'm leaving out that are just not coming to head right now. I just may, it's a matter of choosing to get off the couch and make time. What it does mean is I'm watching less TV. We don't see too many movies. So I'm missing out on all these shows that so many people are interested in because I'm doing other things with my time.
Well, that's good. I mean, sometimes TV gets a little overwhelming.
Well,
Yeah.
the downside about being somebody who creates story for a living is that too often you can, oh, that's where they're going with that. Oh,
Mm.
no, don't do that. No, you could have done this. This would have been better. And so instead of enjoying it, I'm rewriting it as I'm watching it. And so I
Yep.
can tell you exactly what they should have done with the Star Wars prequels to have made them better. And of course, I'm not
Uh-huh.
going to do that right now because that would get me into all sorts of legal trouble with Disney, and I really don't want to go up against the mouse right now. But they really could have been so much better.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Now what does your writing space look like, and what do you need to have around you when you're writing?
Oh, actually, I'm sitting in it right now, and
Okay.
I'm very tempted to pick up the computer and turn it around. You can see, but this is this lovely desk that I inherited from my father-in-law, and it sits in the middle of my family room, so that even though I'm sitting here, headphones on, usually listening to music, writing, I've got my wife back there. I've got my cat right here, who's um, very upset that I'm not on the phone with you and not cuddling her. I'm, and it's the same space where I do my day job, so that it's writing is work. It's just work I do in off hours. So I'll turn off this computer, I'll turn on that computer, and I'll have it in front of me. Um, I've got a bookshelf right behind me on which I can put fun little things as well as resources that I can use for my day job. I've got all sorts of doodads and things. So I've got photographs up here of my daughters, um, little statues that I've taken back from India to inspire the sequel to The Garden Under the Roof of the World that I'm working on. Um, a surreal painting. Um, if you look really carefully in this painting by Dali, you might just see a unicorn. At least I do. So I surround myself with literature, with art, with um, the resources that um, liven me, but I don't isolate myself from my family so that um, even though I'm sitting here and writing is a lonely thing, I'm part of what's
Mhm.
going on. And if I get to call Walt, could you help me out with something? I just take off the headphones and I go help my wife out with whatever it happens to be.
Okay. Now, do you listen to music, or do you
Oh,
like
yeah.
silence?
Oh, no, I love to write the music. And different stories have different musics to them. Um,
Okay.
so there's a lot of really wonderful music from the medieval world. I mentioned Hildegard de Bingen, amongst other things. She was a musician and composed some gorgeous pieces of music that I love to listen to when I'm writing about the medieval era. For the Johnny Talon book, it was much more contemporary stuff. So I was listening to St. Vincent, or I was listening to P.J. Hardy, or I was listening to um, Beatles, or whatever sparked me for that moment. And so a lot of rock and roll, a lot of jazz
Mhm.
um, went into that story.
Okay. And you mentioned that you have a cat.
Yes, Gwen.
When you're writing, does your cat hinder you or help you?
She'll frequently come back. She's not a lap cat. But if she wants cuddles, she'll go and tap, tap, tap on the side of me and hint that she wants me to get away from my chair and get down and pet her or comb her. She's a long-haired cat, and so she just loves to be combed. It's so luxurious. She can't get enough of it. And so she'll pester me until I get out the comb and write. If nothing else, it gives me a break. It gets me up and moving. And being a long hair cat, I'm very invested in combing her because that cuts down on the hairballs.
Hmm.
And nobody wants to step on that at 5 in the morning with the lights off. Oh no, in bare feet.
That's very true.
She's a very, very loving, gentle cat. I've never had a cat who's so gentle. She's never once caught any of us with her claws. Um, Even when we play, she plays gently.
Okay. I just have two more questions for
Yes.
you. Where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And you can get Walt's work at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. And where else can people find your books?
Mostly online. The publishers both have websites where where you can make purchases. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, um, Walmart, Target, BookBub, wherever your favorite book retailer is, you can find these books for sale.
Okay. And my last question, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Oh, great. You'll find that I'm very active on Facebook under W.B.J. Williams. I'm somewhat active on Blue Sky, Instagram. Um, I should be more active on Mastodon, but I just haven't been able to get off my heels and be more active there. Threads, I'm very active on Threads. Um, I have a website, wbj-williams.net, where you can learn a lot of information about the backstories of some of these stories. So if you want to learn more about the characters in the Garden at the Roof of the World and learn a little bit more of the history and the culture of the 13th century, there's a lot up there. And there's recorded interviews of me doing some readings, and so if you're curious to know, would I enjoy this? You can sit and listen to me read from a part of the story and decide for yourself, yeah, this is fun. I'm going to go and buy these books and read it. And of course, um, I will be at ReaderCon as one of the program participants this summer. ReaderCon is happening this year at the Quincy Marriott in July, and me and a whole bunch of other authors will be talking about story, doing readings from a story. You can meet some really great people, including me.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for joining me in this interview, W.B.J. Williams. And we appreciate your time.
Selena, thank you so much for inviting me into your bookshop. I really appreciate spending some time with you, and hopefully one day we can do this in person so I can get to meet some of your customers.
Hopefully, we will be talking to you. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Have a great day. Bye bye.
You too.